Welcome, 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 everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. We've had a brief hiatus, but I'm so glad to be back with you today. And I think that we have a very interesting show that we want you to participate in. We're going to be discussing reparations. And as you know, we've discussed reparations for at least 3 shows just on reparations. And so this makes show number 4 on reparations. However, this one has a very specific twist to it. We're going to be talking about reparations for Americans who are descendants of slaves. It is said that this movement for reparations has thousands of quiet members. But the organization was founded by Yvette Carnell, a former Democratic aide for 2 politicians, national politicians, and LA attorney Antonio Moore back in 2019. The American Descendants of Slavery is a nonpartisan organization, and I'm personally very intrigued by this organization or movement. So I hope that you too will enjoy this conversation. First up, we have Mr. Johnny Morant, Jr. Johnny is a member of the American Descendants of Slavery outreach team and is the current treasurer for the state of North Carolina chapter. He is a proud graduate of Johnson C. Smith University and has worked in the IT field for the past 24 years. He has been a proud ADOS member since 2019. Johnny's been in this since the beginning of time, we should say. He is on board with the ADOS mission of cash reparations for the American Descendants of Slavery from the federal government and to promote the Black agenda of the organization. Welcome to the show, Johnny. Unmute yourself, Johnny. Johnny, unmute yourself. Hello.
Hey, good evening, Pam.
All right. Okay, so next up we have is Latasha Gibson, or I should say Dr. Latasha Gibson. Latasha, unmute yourself. She is the state liaison of the North Carolina chapter of the American Descendants of Slavery Advocacy Foundation. She is also a research associate for the ADOS Research Institute. In addition to the fight for lineage-based reparations and a new ethnic designation, Latasha is passionate about resolving the issues of persistent discrimination, gentrification, and environmental racism that affect Black Americans. Welcome to the show, Latasha.
Good evening, Pam.
All right. And last but certainly not least, we have William Dickens. William is a member of the ADOS Advocacy Foundation. He is the Vice President of Communication Workers of America Union, which is one of America's largest and most diverse unions. He is committed to advocating for the restoration of pensions and free health insurance within unions, as well as increasing the number of unionized jobs in America. Welcome to the show, William.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right, guys. Oh, wow. The chat is pretty lit. That's great. Okay. All right. Let me I want to acknowledge all these people. That's wonderful. Willis was here like super early. Hey, Willis. Okay. All right, Audrey and Elijah and Loretta. Hey, Loretta, my soror. ES38. Okay, ADOS. Listen, I'm calling it ADOS because I don't know how else to say it for short.
That's correct.
He's ADOS fam. Okay, Maryland. Okay.
That's right.
Right. Alvonia, Creighton. What's up? Hey, Nick Music. I'm just acknowledging everybody. Okay. All right. This is great. Listen, you guys did a great job. You did as I asked you. You spread the word. I appreciate that. All right. Great. I'm trying to, you all, I mean, they are in here
You're
deep.
welcome.
Fantastic. All right. Okay. Thank you, good people. So hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe too. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to go round robin with you guys just as as I made introductions, and the same question for all three of you. Johnny, why did you join ADOS? I mean, you joined in 2019, and they didn't start to 2019. So what's up? What got you intrigued with the organization?
Well, initially, it was a conversation that was going on online, and it was a conversation around gentrification in Raleigh. And I reached out to some of the people that were having that conversation, and that's how I initially got introduced to the local people that were a part of ADOS at the time. Um, I had already been watching Breaking Brown, which is Yvette Carnell's YouTube channel, and Tone Talks, which is Antonio Moore's YouTube channel. And I
Mm-hmm.
was pretty familiar with all the discussions that were going on around reparations at that time. And I just wanted to make sure that as time went on, that I was more politically involved so that my children wouldn't be excluded from everything that America has to offer because I was just voting. And basically, I was just voting blue up until pretty much up until Obama's second term because I got frustrated after his first term when he started pulling in all of Clinton's old cabinet members, and his slogan was "Change you can believe in," but everything started looking the same. So that's when I started to take a deeper look into other things that or other possibilities that were out there. And multiple years later, ADOS came along. So and once I got in contact with those people locally, that's how I met Latasha and several other people that were starting up a chapter here in North Carolina.
Okay. Okay. So, Dr. Gibson, Dr. Latasha, your turn.
Yes, well, I actually started watching Yvette Carnell in late 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and I started getting involved in the movement in 2019. And I think my participation was a combination of things. I was going through transition, and my field has been engineering, and I've noticed that there's a lot of hiring discrimination within the engineering field, particularly within the green energy or so-called new green energy economy. But also at the time, I was pretty much following progressive politics,
Mm-hmm.
and I did see calls for AUS, and I kind of put two and two together that Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore were leaders of the ADOS movement, and that the ADOS movement was for reparations. And I just followed the discussion, particularly when it comes to wealth, because everything that they stated so far has been consistent, and it's really made a lot of things sense, made things in my life make sense that couldn't be remedied by, advice that's been given to me by people within my circle, university, and family when it comes to building wealth, uh, maintaining employment, and things that really impact ADOS at a level that it does not affect other ethnicities. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've been pretty much involved, and it's been helpful in my life because I can use skills and subject matter that I have not been able to use necessarily in my own career with various projects within the ADOS movement.
Okay. All right. And William?
I joined, found out about ADOS about like Tasha in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And it take a lot of convincing me. My life had showed me that I was ADOS, and it was the answer to my why. And when I say my why, because I have been incarcerated, and
Mm-hmm.
while being incarcerated, I saw a lot of ADOS men there, and I always had a question like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Something is not right. it's no way that we are being locked up at these rates and it ain't something intentional being done.
Yes.
So when I heard Yvette Cornell, the data was clear. We were being targeted. The same system that had enslaved us was now incarcerating us to re-enslave us. And she was the first to make me understand that even our group was falling for it, saying it was something wrong with us. And Antonio Moore, once listening to him and him laying out that data, it made it clear that we a worthless group. So it's easy to throw us away, especially if we ain't got passion. One thing, passion, when I say passion, specifically for our people, when I say that when we look at the data and we understand that when you don't have wealth and you go to court, you're going to be thrown away. So white men commit more crimes, yet is more ADOS men in prison. So that data alone said, wait a minute, how this group is going, how they got the highest numbers when the group that's committing the more crime keep going home. So that wealth compensation and me being a victim of it made me determined to get in this fight and help move that line forward.
Okay. All right. So a question I have, and this is for any of you to answer or all of you to answer. American Descendants of Slavery has been criticized for possibly being anti-immigrant or being nativist because someone questioned VP Harris's black card since she is black like this due to her Jamaican father and Indian mother, meaning that her lineage isn't the result of the slave trade. How do you explain the lineage creed of ADOS? And all of you can do that, or one at a time, however you're going to explain it.
I could go first.
Okay.
So what I would say to that is that when people look at Kamala Harris' lineage, they're alluding to her track record. She was Attorney General of California, and she is known for being an enforcer of the 95 crime bill there. And one of the things that has been tied to her was the fact that she has refused to decrease the population within California prisons because she had expressed the need for cheap labor in the case of fighting forest fires. And she's also been on record targeting truancy laws against Black parents. And so when you look at the crime committed by most Black Americans, we know that most of those crimes are non-violent poverty crimes that people partake in for their own survival. And we know that Black people partake in these crimes because of the lack of wealth. And we know through the ADOS movement that lack of wealth is tied to the institution of slavery and the 300 years of exclusionary laws that's been targeted to Black people, particularly during the time of the New Deal when more white Americans were ushered into the middle class. And so when you look at that, we're looking at where that person lies in terms of their empathy. And that empathy is based on that person understanding, our condition. And Kamala Harris, to me, she has shown that she does not have that empathy and she does not have that understanding, because when she was asked whether she supported reparations for American descendants of slavery, she said that she wasn't going to do anything specifically for Black Americans, even after she listed all of these things such as redlining and Jim Crow and all the exclusionary laws after institution of slavery. So I don't think questioning her lineage is, out of the question. But, I think the main thing is to put it in the proper context. And that context is her policies and her track record and what she has stated herself on records. So that would be my response.
Okay. One thing that you said, Dr. Gibson, there that struck in my mind, it was something I was going to ask all of you, is why start up another organization, albeit it's specifically for reparations for descendants of slavery? Why couldn't this same focus be incorporated into another legacy organization or whatever that already exists? And I ask you that because of the one thing that you said, and I was writing it down, about nonviolent poverty crimes.
Right.
And Bishop Barber, who is of here of North Carolina, his poverty march and his whole movement and it's a proven fact that even a lot of cases where children are abused or neglected, I should say, go up because of why? Because parents are out here working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to put food on the table, and it's all a cause of poverty. So tell me, why do you guys think that it was necessary to have a separate organization to address these issues, the issues of really poverty and pay equity and economics in terms of reparations, rather than not just put it within, say, the NAACP or Bishop Barber's organization or whatever? Johnny, what do you think to that? Johnny, do you hear me? Uh-oh.
Yeah, he may have sound issues.
I'll try to answer.
Johnny, can you hear me? Are you on Google Chrome or Firefox? Did you use those things? He's having a hard time. William, go ahead. You answer.
I'm using Chrome, Google Chrome.
Well, one thing I say, most of these legacy organizations, and what ADOS do, when Tasha talk about track record, we keep track record. And at some point, you got to admit when some things have failed you. So when we talk about these legacy organizations, the ADOS community has suffered and still been on a decline with all these legacy organizations. And you even got things like the NAACP saying, we don't represent Black people. We was formed with white people. They basically saying, you're not our main focus. They have said this themselves, that Black people are not their main focus. So ADOS was formed out of making us, the ADOS people, the main focus. And things like William Barber, when you talk about his poverty campaign, that's for everybody. That's not specific to us neither. And he do, like, I ran in the rim where I didn't run into him. I went there with intentions to have a good conversation with him in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He came there, and his message was around trying to get Black folks to vote blue no matter who. So when he laid out his little speech telling us to go vote for the Democrats, I stood up in the middle of the church and I asked a specific question. What is our demands? We have been voting with no demands. We have let people like William Barber run around and say, go vote. You got to vote. You got to save democracy. It ain't our job to save democracy. It's our job to carve a pathway for our kids and our families that depends on us to survive here. These people are basically, they work for the Democratic Party to protect that party. Our need is not their concerns. So if it's our need, we should have a demand. And when I say we should have a demand, when the Democratic Party want to vote, voting is an exchange. So we need the Democratic Party. We can say, this is our demand. Can you give us this, like reparations, a transformative Black agenda? You don't just get my vote because you're a Democrat. You get my vote and you fix my community. These legacy organizations have let us down, and we haven't held them accountable for letting us down. We look at our community dilapidate. Just ride around, go through these Black communities. We 54% of the homelessness. At some point, we got to hold somebody accountable and say, these people have failed us. ADOS was birthed out of these people have failed us.
Okay. Mark Lee in our audience has a question for you. And I don't know who wants to take this on. You know, Professor Dr. Sandy Darity is here at Duke University in North Carolina. What is your take on his work on reparations? And Mark also asked the question, and wasn't the Nation of Islam doing some of this work decades ago? Johnny, you want to answer that?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I can hear you well now.
You can't
So yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yep. So Sandy Darity has done a lot of good work as far as looking at the wealth data, but he wasn't really getting any push until he got associated with Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, and them popularizing his message around the wealth data, and both of them really Antonio and Dr. Darity worked together to produce a lot of stuff, even though Dr. Darity had done a lot of previous work. And as far as the Nation of Islam doing some of this work decades ago, we have to look at what have been the results of the works that they've done around reparations. Can we see anything that's been produced from that work around reparations, or has it just been a lot of talk and speculations around what's going on and how they are going to do anything for the Black community? We've had multiple meetings throughout North Carolina, and sometimes on those calls, we would have people from the NOI come onto the calls, and their main thing was basically about getting land and not focusing on the cash reparations that's also necessary for us to have, along with that land, and education and mental health services and reparatory protection programs that should be included with everything that we need as a group. And a lot of their plan was like just focused around getting land and having a separate state, sort of like what the Native Americans have and within this country. And we already know that having a separate state within the United States isn't going to happen for us. So we need to focus on things that can be achieved. And I don't think a lot of the stuff that they were doing was actually feasible. That's just my personal opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. Latasha, Dr. Gibson, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I do want to add to the question that William had answered regarding the legacy organizations. And I would say that many of our legacy organizations, they're actually compromised based upon the corporations for which they receive money from. Mm-hmm. And a specific example of that is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has been very detrimental to Black wealth, especially when it comes to subprime lending. But instead of holding them accountable, NAACP and I believe National Urban League have formulated a partnership with them where they essentially giving them PR. And, that information is on record because the Department of Justice even sued them based upon discrimination as far as loans. And if I'm not mistaken, also discrimination against Black employees.
If I want to interject a little bit, I don't know so much of the organizations, but I definitely know that Bishop T.D. Jakes, he's the one that made the big deal with them. Yes. Okay, I didn't hear about NAACP and none of the others, but I heard that he had a big shindig with them, something huge, and it happened before. All of the P. Diddy stuff went off. Right. I mean, we heard it before that. That went off in November. And I think this happened like in September, whatever, that we started hearing about that. Yes. But I digress. But I remember for a fact. I don't know. They may have gotten some.
That was recent. Yeah, it was just this past year.
He got a huge.
Right.
I mean, what he got going on, his thing was big. I mean,
with the houses out in Texas.
It was real estate deal
out in Texas. Yeah.
What'd you say, William? What'd you say?
The real estate deal with the home ownership out there in Texas.
There was something in Atlanta too.
Yeah. So that's why we so another thing about us being an organization data driven, when you got to look at that money and look at when these people make these deals, it's really carving us out because we don't have that kind of money. So when you look at the money, when you're talking about TD Jakes and you hear what it takes to be the benefit from that program, that's an automatic carve out of us. I always use that the new black and white sign is the dollar sign. This is what, this ain't got the white sign up no more, saying whites only or blacks only. All they got to do is put a price on it, and it automatically carves us out.
Listen, I want to. There's so many of you in this chat. Please, I don't see many thumbs ups or anything for the channel, and that is a free way to support the channel. And I would really appreciate it if you just hit the thumbs up on YouTube. Everything is algorithm data driven, and if you don't hit thumbs up, it's like, oh, nobody watches, nobody cares, nobody, she did this for nothing. So please hit the thumbs up, and also please consider subscribing to this channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. Someone said the NOI gave us the Million Man March and did nothing to organize those men that showed up. Not a single name collected or called to unite the community. Oh, God. Yeah.
That's what I mean by keeping track record. We got to keep people track record. We got to be fine with counting the failures and hold people accountable. The accountability piece in our group, in our community is bad. We will watch people let us down, not hold people accountable in the space when they say they representing us. They don't represent us. They represent their self-interest. And you can see the outcome of it when you look at our communities, when you look at the policies that we get. I don't know if we're going to talk about it much, but this people of color, BIPOC, this is 100% eraser of descendants of slaves. These people do not got the same history and have not paid the price that we have paid. It ain't a skin color. Yvette Cornell always say the new white is being accepted in America. We still ain't accepted, and we've been here over 400 years. So you got people coming in the country right now, if you're paying attention. You got illegal immigrants coming in the country getting guaranteed jobs, guaranteed houses, and they blacker than me. So at some point, we got to realize it ain't about the skin color no more. It's about our lineage here. The legacy that we hold is slavery. We still the target. So by being a target, we got to get specific with our demands for our group. And if anybody finds that controversial, you are basically saying it's okay for us to be starved out for my kids, Tasha, Johnny, your kids, grandkids, not to have a future in the country they built. If that controversial, I'm sorry. I refuse to see my people re-enslaved again.
And Pam, and one of the other things that also happens is we'll see politicians, primarily the Democrats, they'll use our history and our lineage to illustrate what the problem is that's going on across Black America. But then when it comes time to present the solutions, then it becomes, the solution is for BIPOC. It's for everybody else, except for white men. And then it's like all these programs will get developed and it's for everybody else. And then we're at the table looking like, okay, what's actually in it for us? And then when you go digging through these bills to see the legislation that actually got produced, there's nothing there for us. So that's where we have to start getting more specific about how we outline what we want to these politicians and make sure when they draft these bills and legislations that is specific to ADOS and not everybody. If you're going to use our story to make the case for why these programs need to exist, then it needs to exist for us, not for everybody else.
Right.
Okay. Is that what you meant, Latasha, when you said declare a new ethnic designation? What did that mean? What does that mean?
Well, the ethnic designation, the reason why we need it is so that we can disaggregate data. And yeah, I was going to talk about affirmative action, but I could mention some things fairly briefly. So when we look at ADOS, those that descend from the institution of chattel slavery versus Black immigrants, most Black immigrants did not immigrate into the U.S. until after the Immigration Act of 1965. But when you look at the data, the highest percentage in terms of increase in immigration for Black immigrants was in the 1990s. And again, you know, when we look at Black Americans and wealth data, the one consistent factor or common denominator, I should say, is family wealth. That's when we look at housing or home ownership rates, when we look at even graduation rates, when we look at health disparities, it all comes back to family wealth, the wealth of your immediate family or wealth that you have inherited through your family. And the problem is when you do not disaggregate that data, you are including people who have a different distribution of wealth versus ADOS, where the wealth data is predominantly flat. And statistically, you know, ADOS or Black Americans in general, we make up 13 to 14% of the US population. But when we look at poverty, we contribute about 20% of the poverty. So the reason why you want to disaggregate the data is because you want to understand or fully capture the effect of not just the institution of slavery, but Jim Crow, redlining, and all the other exclusionary laws that follow. Because one thing that we do not speak on, particularly in the case of millennials and Gen Z that comes up, is how the New Deal only applied to white Americans, which was inclusive of white immigrants, and how mostly Black Americans were left out of it because they were contained to jobs such as sharecropping and maid, and those jobs were specifically eliminated for consideration of Social Security, not to mention the GI Bill when it comes to you know, Black military coming back. And so when we talk about ethnic designation, you know, we're talking about disaggregating data so that we can get to the bottom of the data and make that direct connection, because this has been talked about in academia, but that is like the final frontier in terms of solidifying the effect of Jim Crow and these exclusionary laws so that we can make the claim for full redress through reparations.
And I want to piggyback on something when Tasha talking about that data. We have did disaggregation of this data, like in California. When you look at the Nigerian family in California, they worth $60,000 liquid. When you look at the ADOS household, we only worth $200 liquid. When you go out to Baltimore and you look at the ADOS family, we only worth $8 liquid. Not Nigerian, but the Haitians in Baltimore is worth $3,000 liquid. So
Boston.
we see across the board when you start to disaggregate these groups where we want a flat blackness, is that America knows exactly who we are. We have been struggling with our identity crisis. It's time for us to stop struggling with it, because this data is saying you ain't got to know you're the descendant of slave. The United States, America knows you are a descendant of slave. All the data points to it. When Tasha keep talking about this wealth, we can draw a line from slavery to current time of the cost of this slavery that we still carry. It means you can't even outrun it. So.
Yeah, and Ms. Pam, let me add one other thing. We started a campaign and we ended up training over 1,000 people for the office management and budget last year when they asked about ethnic designations. So
Uh-huh.
we started a specific one for American Descendants of Slavery, and
Oh.
like I said, we trained over 1,000 people, and all of this is available online. You can hear where a lot of our people called in and made 2-minute statements on
Mhm.
behalf of American Descendants of Slavery.
Uh-huh.
You can see a lot of the comments that people put in, because we also had the opportunity to write letters to the OMB to get a specific ethnic designation for ADOS. There
Hmm.
were some other groups as well, like MENA, which is Middle Eastern,
Yeah.
um, North African,
North Africa.
which actually got their specific ethnic designation for them to be able to, for the government to be able to delineate the data on their behalf. But we didn't, because we ended up getting some pushback from legacy organizations that actually said they needed to hold off on doing this process and allow them to have time to provide their input after we'd already done all of our work to get
You didn't
everything
get
in and get
any.
our training done.
What more input did you need?
They just weren't paying attention, and they didn't put in their information as far as what they needed to do, as far as determine what ethnic designation that they wanted to have. And for the most part, they were just saying we don't need one. They were just saying we just need to be black.
No, nuh-uh.
Oh,
'Cause you
Lord.
know what? How is it? Don't get me started. You know that on that list, that little check mark list, it has white Hispanic, and then it's got Hispanic.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's up with that?
So
Listen,
so
y'all remember that girl that got on there and talked about we needed to get the F out of this country, right? She was
Oh,
Hispanic. No, no, no. She was white
White
Hispanic.
Hispanic.
white Hispanic.
well, so if
Says
you that's once again, we got to go back in history. And I always say we got to have long memories. So in the 70s, the the Mexican population protested the Supreme Court to be seen as white. And basically what you're looking at these groups doing is jumping around. They double dutching all over the place for anywhere as a benefit. And the only reason they're able to do these things is because we don't stand up and say, your story ain't my story. You're going to have to come up with your own story. You're not going to be able to use mine. Johnny said earlier, you'll see them, what you will see them doing is they'll say, you have our legacy organization, Derek Johnson, Al Sharpton out there talking about slavery, but taking that political capital to
Right.
benefit Hispanics, while we
Right.
get no benefit. So he used our story and then turn around and say, give it to the Hispanic community. And we gotta read the book called The Making of Hispanic. The book
Hispanics.
explains it's a made up term. What they did is took a lot of people and stuck them under this umbrella and saying then they run around and say, oh, they're the biggest group. No, we still the biggest group in this country because we come from the same thing. So when I say Hispanics ain't the biggest group, because you got Guatemalans under there, you got Puerto Ricans under there. See, they don't come from the same
Cubans.
background, not the same
Right,
people, different.
right,
We the same people.
right.
And I think that the piece that we struggle with so hard is our identity. Nobody don't want to be connected to slavery, yet the Jews won't let the Holocaust die. Why is we not connected to our history? It's a reason you want to be connected to history. That is where your wealth lies. Like it or not, the wealth you've been plundered lies in slavery. No
Yes.
different than the Jews say, never forget. We should
Yeah.
be running around here the same way saying, never forget.
Forget.
Right.
We
Mhm.
running around like a quarterback. I don't even remember the last one. Can't do it.
Oh man.
Oh Lord. Oh.
And, and Pamela, I also wanted to touch on something else that you brought up earlier on in the conversation about VP Kamala Harris and her lineage and her ethnicity. Um, One of the things that was going on during that time is that ADOS advocacy foundation itself hadn't been fully organized as far as and the foundation itself. But what you had was a lot of people that were online that felt associated with American Descendants of Slavery, the lineage.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between the lineage of the people and the actual organization. And then you had a lot of people that were just saying a lot of wild stuff online, and that's part of the reason why we we realized that we needed to be organized. We're like, okay, well, we can't have people just saying any old thing about anybody and just saying wild stuff all over the place. So the foundation was a way to separate from people that were actually serious about doing political work from the people who just wanted to be online yelling at everybody and making noise and fuss about every little thing. And like Tashi was saying, we do have the right to question not her blackness, but her ethnicity and to see where she's from and where she stands politically. There's nothing wrong with questioning where she stands politically and even looking into her background to see how that may have impacted how she does politics. And that's something that a lot of people have to get over, just looking at someone's skin color and assuming that their politics align with what's best for our group.
Let's see. Showy Howie wrote, "Can the American Civil War be over without reparations? The MAGA crowd seems to think their side won. I can't. In my humble opinion, we can't honor the Union veterans without reparations, without finishing the work of the war." Okay. Ooh, y'all got this. I can't keep up with the chat, y'all.
Well, it's one thing about the Civil War I wanted to say. First, the key factor, one thing you need to remember about the Civil War: the people that owned slaves got reparations.
Right.
They got their reparations. They sure did.
And they own slaves. This is why it's so critical for us to have passion. When I keep talking about this passion piece, because we get a lot of pushback a lot of times trying to blame us for the condition we in as if we ain't at the mercy of the United States government. Now, one thing I always like to tell people, and I always like to use very common sense, because it's sometimes the common sense element is gone too because of the social engineering piece. So if we look at white America, we got a model here that you can just almost copy if you wanted to, just to use common sense. So white America benefited from slavery. They benefited from Jim Crow. They benefited from convict leasing. This was all wealth being built while we was the shoes they wore. You see? Now America is saying, I want to throw the pair of shoes away. We are saying we're not going to get thrown away. And so white people benefited from slavery and still needed all this government help. When we talk about the New Deal, that was government still helping white people build wealth. Our group would turn around and do this. We need to do it ourselves. So how is it that the group that didn't have to deal with slavery, didn't have to deal with Jim Crow, didn't have to deal with convict lease, didn't have to deal with a war on drugs, get the government to fix them, but we got to do it ourselves? That ain't the case. We can't do it ourselves neither. We need federal government involvement. And we need anybody that talks about us doing something ourselves, throw them away. They are not on your side. Make no mistake about it.
Well, I'm going to say something that you guys probably aren't going to like, because you're saying that we're not electing Democrats without the accountability piece. And I will say this, I can tell you for sure, 110% for sure, if Trump gets in, that's a wrap. You could forget. They will laugh us out. They would laugh at Addo's who? Addo's what? Spell that again or whatever. I mean, for sure, we will not get it.
Well, here's the thing, right? So here's the thing. The way I explain that, that's another piece. We want to get something without bleeding for it. I ain't scared of Trump. We done had leadership that said it's okay to lynch a man you catch him walking down the street. Once again,
we'll institute that again.
Well, and if he do, we should be ready to fight. Make no mistake what I'm telling you is this. Joe Biden, right now with Joe Biden in office, we being laughed at because Joe Biden has done everything to destroy black families. Joe Biden passed the 94 crime bill.
I know what he did in the past, but I mean,
he still is.
But it's too much that he has on his plate that he and Kamala have done now that you can't argue against. I mean,
I can't argue against none of that. Was specific.
But
their biggest agenda been immigrants. So their biggest agenda been immigrants. We talked about specificity. Joe Biden them hasn't been specific with anything for us at all. So one thing ADOS is saying is we got to be willing to bleed. And as in the fine words of Yvette Cornell, Yvette said to herself, she said, you cannot, she was talking about the moral compass. Can you believe that the moral compass bend towards justice? In the words of Yvette Cornell, she said, I don't believe that. I believe you got to bend that moral compass.
Right.
And we got to be willing to bend that moral compass. We think we're not going to sacrifice something to make this thing turn around. You're going to have to sacrifice something. If we keep running around letting them use fear, because that's what they really using is fear to push you over here. Oh, they're going to put you back in chains. Oh, they're going to beat you across the head with a whip. Oh, my God, they're going to take your kids and feed them to the alligators again. If we keep voting like that, we don't get anything. It's time to stop being scared and say, for this time, I'm standing with my people. I'm going to make a sacrifice. One of our agendas is we're doing down ballot Democrats. When we do down ballot, it's the top of the ticket. We leave it blank. We write, if you can fill in the blank, you write ADOS in on it. You you are sending a message to the Democratic Party, as well as we can make you win, we will make you lose, and we're willing to make that to pay the sacrifice to make you lose. Too many of us don't want to bleed. You're not going to turn this thing around. You got some people trying to jump party to party. You got some black people right now saying, I'm going to the Republicans. Some blacks saying, well, Joe Biden is the lesser of two evil. No, they both two evil men. They both two racist white men.
Right.
When are we going to stand for ourselves and say, this time, I'm voting for the collective? ADOS is saying, this time, we are voting for the collective, not the interest of two racist white men.
Yeah, and I want to add on to what William said. We're looking to get long-term gain from short-term pain. And the thing is, when you look at the voting statistics, no voting bloc has been more loyal to the Democrats than ADOS. No one gives that speech to Hispanics, to white women, when they break for the Republican side more so than the Democrats. And we've already seen through the uncommitted campaign, the response in terms of the political language when Democrats' feet are held to the fire. And that's the problem. We haven't held them accountable. And what's also happened, during the years is that both parties have been corrupted by corporations. The only difference is the ways that they receive that money. So their allegiance isn't to anyone. When you think about it, their allegiance is to the corporations for which they receive donations from. And also, and I'll go ahead and say it, those for which they do insider trades on as well. So, we have to, if we are to get out of the condition that we find ourselves in, and this is reparations included, along with our Black agenda, we've got to elevate our political maturity, because we can look at a number of websites of Democrats proclaiming to be for environmental, dealing with environmental racism, dealing with health issues, raising the wage gap. But when you look at their voting record, what bills have they authored? What fights have they had? It just doesn't add up, because, we're not paying attention to their actions, but we're buying into their rhetoric. So, it's time for us to elevate our political awareness and look at the action of these candidates and start pretty much raising our bars and raising our bar in terms of expectations, because when we look at the mass incarceration bill, we still got Black American men that are still in prison, doing 10 to 20 years, but they've already legalized marijuana in a number of states, and no one is talking about releasing those men from prison or even giving them any type of compensation. But when it came to I believe meth and what we those drugs that are that are in the opioid, they provided everything from health benefits, payment.
We're about to have a big discussion.
Yeah. So we we have to look at not just the track record, but the behavior, specifically in terms of how they treat other ethnicities compared to ADOS, because we've normalized a lot of these things, and and we're not holding these people accountable and looking at their forms of corruption.
Can I ask you guys this? And this is something that I've dealt with this in other shows that I've done, is that I have noticed, and I've been doing these deep dives in this whole entertainment industry and what have you. Have you noticed how much whenever there is a problem in our country for us, if there's some big, it's a wash and repeat cycle of what happens. One, our good guy Ben Crump comes to the forefront and he represents the family, and then Al Sharpton, Reverend Al, goes and he'll do the eulogy, and it's a rinse and repeat of major things that happen against us, and horrible things. And I'm trying to figure out what happened to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
It's for everybody.
No, we don't hear about them at all anymore. When Gwen Ifill, when she retired, I see her still doing commentary from time to time, but I don't see anybody from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund involved in any of these cases. They weren't involved in Trayvon Martin. They weren't involved in what's the lady's name? Breonna Taylor. They weren't involved in. It's so many names. It's like, oh, I forgot that one. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. When Will's saying that they're for everybody, he's speaking about every other group except for us. So a lot of the things that they are involved in now has to do with entertainment. The NAACP is getting into books, television, and movies, and have lost focus on doing what's right for the people. And this is specifically at the national level.
Right.
You do have some people at the local level who are doing good things, but at the national level, they're focused on trying to make money and make celebrities.
And that brings me to my point. This whole thing with ADOS, what you all are talking about, accountability and all of that. Have you thought about making these organizations accountable for what they're supposed to be doing for us? Those legacy organizations, civil rights and the different rights that we are afforded now, they would not have happened without us. And they were for us. And everybody else, affirmative action, white women benefited more from affirmative action than anybody else. That's a fact. Right. So my question is, just as ADOS is saying, making everybody else be accountable or whatever, why is it that you guys can't say, hey, we want you all to be accountable too, because you've got our people's money. This is what the things were founded upon or whatever. Why can't we do that as well?
Well, I'll say this from my personal perspective. That's not our agenda to get these other groups to move to doing these things. That would be the work of the people that actually support them. ADOS has a political outlook, and it does a lot of teaching. That's what Antonio and Ivana Carnell have been doing online for years, politically educating people to get them up to speed about how we should be interacting with our politicians and also within these groups. So when the people who aren't a part of ADOS, but they understand the messaging, they can go into these groups that they're already a part of and be like, hey, we need to start doing things differently because we are no longer supporting the people. Now, if we have people that are part of both ADOS and a part of like the NAACP or
Yes.
National Urban League, then they can go within those organizations and spread the message as well. But that's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is the politics and policies for reparations and the Black agenda. Now, everybody that's listening tonight, if you want to be involved with the NAACP, National Urban League, or any of these other organizations, and you know what our message is, please move forward, go within those organizations and get the message spread. We've funny story, just locally, we tried to get involved with a local organization that's heavily involved with the Democratic Party in Durham, and just getting your voice heard in that organization is one thing, but them actually making any changes is almost impossible because they're so ingrained with the Democratic Party. They don't listen to anything outside of what marching orders they get from the Democratic Party.
So you felt it hard to get your messages communicated?
Say that again?
You felt it hard to get your message communicated when you went to the group? I about know what group it is.
Oh yeah, they'll let us speak. But when it comes time to do any action, the people that are leading those organizations, they just exclude it from any part of the agenda.
So what you like what Johnny's saying, what you find most of the time, one thing ADOS is saying, we want to become that legacy organization that our people know that's with them. So what you find in a lot of these, they talk about democracy all the time. Oh, they throw that word around all the time, but they really pushing dictatorship. That's period. Right. You go in the room, it's going to be a dictatorship activity going on. You're going to get to speak, but it's going to be on deaf ears. ADOS is wanting to be the legacy organization that our people need, that'll stand up and say, I am here, represent American Descendants of Slavery, the institution of slavery. That's who we want to be. Because these people, we have explained several different ways how they no longer represent us. And for us to be represented, it's going to take this organization right here to do it. It's with people like me that's been in prison, people like Johnny and Tasha that's been in college. We are the voice of the grassroots people, period. And with Yvette and Antonio Moore understanding it, these two people didn't have to be sitting down talking to people like me. Yvette worked on Capitol Hill. Antonio is a lawyer out in California that he done been around all types of celebrities. Yvette still had compassion for their people, and they knew something was wrong. So they formed this ADOS movement, gave us, like Johnny said, the education we needed to fight for ourselves. If you see anybody standing against this movement, they standing against grassroots people that are suffering in this country. We are suffering. And that's ADOS will tell you, Oprah don't speak for us. Jay-Z don't speak for us. Tyler Perry don't speak for us.
That's all right.
They are the tools of white supremacy. They are their helpers. You got Jay-Z running around pushing private schools while they take the money out of the public schools and put it in the private schools.
That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah. So we being led astray by our black celebrities. It's time for us to take our voice back, and that voice is through ADOS.
Yeah, and I do want to add a couple of things. One of the issues with some of these legacy organizations, and it alludes to what Johnny had mentioned, is that they have a lot of gatekeeping, and that gatekeeping is not just at leadership levels, but it can also be at the level of committees. And when you have that type of gatekeeping, it's hard to get anything pushing through, because when it comes to advocacy work, it's a lot to do with relation building. And the problem is, why do you see a lot of gatekeepers within the Black community? Is so that they can have that proximity to power themselves. and they want that proximity so that they can, they can gain their own self-interest. So that, that's what I want to add. And so when we have like an organization like the ADOS Advocacy Foundation, this provides a pretty clear and transparent ground to do advocacy specific to ADOS, no compromising, standing on your square, looking at data, because this is a movement that's geared around morality, the type of morality that we would expect from our legacy organizations, but that we're not going to attain because of the interests for which they are tied to. So that's the only thing that I want to add.
Okay. Wow, this, you know what, the time has gone by super, super fast. And I know, Johnny, I promised you that I'm going to put up on the screen your, there is a conference that's coming up in October, right?
Yes.
And you all can, I'm going to put it up on the screen and you can tell us more about it. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay, you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see
okay.
it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so tell us about it, Johnny.
So October 3rd through 5th, the ADOS organization, ADOS Advocacy Foundation is having a National Reparations Summit in New Orleans. We're inviting everybody to come out, even people that we've had disagreements with, to come out and put all of their grievances and concerns on the table so that we can move forward and not keep going back and discussing things that are no longer relevant to this discussion. We want to get reparations on the Black agenda for ADOS Americans, and the only way that we can really do it is to come together under one umbrella. Even if we don't agree on everything, we can agree that we need reparations and we need a specific Black agenda to move us forward. And we have a lot of dynamic speakers that are going to be there. We have our president, Yvette Carnell, guest speaker, Nina Turner, presidential nominee, Dr. Cornel West. Marcus Coleman is the vice chairman of the Fulton County Reparations Task Force. Reverend Dr. Kevin Cosby from Simmons College. Aisha Muhammad, the policy director for ADOS AF, and several other folks that are also a part of ADOS AF, like Dr. Lassiter Speller, Dr. Patrick Rogers, and a couple other speakers that we'll have there as well. And we look and hope to see everybody there in October.
All right, looks like you got a sold out section already.
Yeah, that's ADOS
Yeah.
member tickets.
Now the general tickets here ends June 30th for $250, and then you got the VIP, of course, you can still get. So, you guys, the screen is up, and you can just Google this to find it, the National Reparations Summit. Okay.
Yep. And if I know we have a lot of ADOS people in the chat. If any of you can just put the information in the chat, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me see. I'll do that as well.
Yep. And also on the website, we also have the schedule of events, hotel information, and potential and activities you can sign up for as well. So.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in the chat. Okay. There it goes. Anita Daniels wants to know, is the conference in person or is there a virtual option? I didn't see it on the screen, Anita. Person. It's all in person.
Yeah.
Okay. Black families of murder victims have gotten higher compensation by being represented by Crump.
Well, the only thing I say about that, and we talk about this a lot. First of all, I don't want to die to be murdered in the street for a compensation. It's so politically we can get in front of this. We don't have to start counting dead bodies. And we got to understand when you got people running around saying, well, we gonna sue them out of all their money. No, you're not. The money these people got, we're going to talk some data here about wealth in America right quick. White people got $130 trillion. $130 trillion. Now you go sit down and winnow that around your head, what they can do with that kind of money when you think you're going to take it. And we only got $6.9 trillion, which 40% of that is in the hand of black baby boomers in their pensions, which means when these black baby boomers die, you're going to lose almost 40% of your wealth, which put us even in a worse condition. The racial wealth gap is what we are not paying attention to. This gap is growing. So I'll let Johnny talk some more about it, Tasha.
Yeah, let me just quantify this a little bit, because that number that Will gave as far as black wealth, it's even less now as of Q1 of 2024. It's at $5.1 trillion of wealth, and we're at 13 to 14% of the population, and that $5.17 trillion only equates to 3.4% of the nation's wealth.
Right.
And then when you look at white America, they have $127.97 trillion in wealth, while being 59% of the population. And for them, that equates to 85.4% of the nation's wealth. And if we're talking about equity, then we should be looking at our wealth being on the same percentage as our population, which would bring us around to like 21 plus $1 trillion instead of the $5.7 trillion. So you see there's a vast wealth difference there, and we don't even have enough to be equal to our percentage of the population, and that's a big problem as far as equity is concerned in the United States. And one of the other things that I also wanted to dispel is the myth of black buying power and black spending power, because we constantly get bombarded with these commercials on Radio 1 talking about we have $1.7 trillion in spending power, but you don't see any actual data that provides the spending power of any other group, and no one actually measures their group's wealth in spending power.
Right.
Your wealth is the amount of assets you have minus your debts. It's not how much you can spend. So it's a lot of propaganda that's been going on and infiltrated throughout our community through all types of media, and it needs to stop. And we have to be aware of these numbers and where we actually stand within the United States wealth-wise. And Tasha, I know you had something you wanted to say. So.
Yeah, and like if you were to take Johnny's number, the 1.4 trillion, and divide it by I think the 40 million approximately of Black Americans that live in U.S., that equates to about a little over 10 grand. Not enough for cost of living of anything. And when you look at the percentage of us that are homeless, which varies between making up to close to 50% of different cities across the U.S., we don't even have that amount, some of us. So it's very deceptive, it's very disingenuous, and it doesn't do anything to help us get towards what we need to get to. But I would also add the number in terms of the time, because before it was estimated that our wealth would go to zero by year 2050. That year will probably come up earlier due to COVID. And the other thing that we have to look at is the wealth transfer from baby boomers, particularly from white baby boomers to white millennials and Gen Z. And if that was to occur, then that means that wealth gap would increase even more so. So we don't have I would say collectively outside ADOS movement, the sense of urgency that we need in order to handle this matter. So that would be the last thing that I'd probably add to that.
Okay.
I just want to add something in the comment about financial literacy. This must go away. This must go away. Financial literacy is basic math. If I need $20 for the week and I only got 10, I don't got enough money. Okay? And it don't matter how I add or subtract this. If it takes $20 to live and I only got 10, I don't got enough money. Okay? It ain't a financial literacy problem. So we can go back. Let's go back in time. I like going back because I love to connect the dots. In 1921, coming out of slavery, American Descendants of Slavery, Black Americans, had over 20 million acres of land. Here we are 103 years later. With all this education and all these degrees, we got less than 1 million acres. Something else has happened. And if you can't fill that gap, you need to go do some reading and some research. It'll take me too long to explain to you, but make no mistake, if we knew the value of land when we couldn't write our name, if we knew the value of a home when we couldn't write our name, make no mistake, we definitely know the value of it now. We don't got the wealth now. What I'm telling you is 100 years ago, we had more wealth than we do now. We just got a lot of education, and we thinking we constantly keep reflecting something is wrong with us. No, it's a broken system that has targeted us. This is why I say we got to have some passion, and we got to be willing to do the work. If you just want to say something wrong with us, you ain't gonna never figure this out. The data is saying it's nothing wrong with you. You don't got no wealth. That's what doesn't happen. It's simple. We acting like you got to do algebra to calculate your bills. You don't need algebra. It's basic math.
And in the paper that Dr. Darity and Antonio Moore did, 10 Things We Get Wrong About Closing the Racial Wealth Gap, they talk about financial literacy. And in that paper, they discovered that Black people actually save more on average than white people do. It's just that white people have so much more wealth than we do that that they are able to save more money than what we actually have. But percentage wise, we actually save more money. So financial literacy, yes, it's good, and there's some other financial investment type things that we may not have access to because we don't have the amount of wealth that's required to be able to get into that and into those things.
Okay.
And can I say one more thing?
I want to say something in the chat that I do not like. Please don't call each other racist and things like that, especially people you do not know. And I'm particularly sensitive to it because I know these people that is being called that, and they are far from it. Because you don't agree with someone, it's okay. It's okay to disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable, and we don't have to be unkind towards one another, particularly as Black people. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you. But one last thing, Johnny, and we're going to say goodnight.
Okay. Oh, so the other thing I was looking at, it was another comment that was made in the chat about Black people consume too much and save and invest too little. There's also data out there about that from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics that actually show what Black people have been spending their money on, and most of it goes, the highest percentage of our spending is on housing, transportation, food, and clothing. And very little of it actually goes to consumer durable goods. As everybody likes to say, Black people spend too much money on hair products, Jordans, and all this other stuff. In comparison to what it costs to actually live in the United States, it's peanuts. And people need to stop looking at reasons to try to blame everything, every condition that the Black community is in on Black people's habits, and not holding the government and the policies that have been produced accountable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, listen, I have enjoyed this conversation. Like Anita Daniels said that she thought it was very interesting. I'm thankful, Johnny, that you had listened in on a previous show and contacted me, because I was like, what is the ADOS? And I welcome other people to do the same, because I love to learn new things. I love to be enlightened about some things. I like to look into things and learn something new, right? And it's all good. And I appreciate each and every one of you, Johnny, William, Dr. Gibson. You guys were very gracious and kind, and I appreciate you so much for coming on my show. And I want you guys to participate next week. I'm going to have a roundtable discussion about the about the erosion of civil rights in this country.
Okay.
Oh boy, that should be very interesting.
Yeah, that should be good. And thank you for having us, Pam.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's say goodbye to everybody. We're gonna wave off. See you guys. See you next week.